Episode 109, The Importance of Emotional Intimacy for High-Achieving Men with Rhonda Farr.
Welcome to Latter-day Life Coaches, the podcast where each episode is a conversation between me, Heather Rackham, and one of my amazing coach colleagues. Each coach here is a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and a highly trained, experienced life coach making a great impact in the lives of their clients. And together, we have one main goal, helping you live your best life no matter what. You ready for this conversation with a coach? Here we go.
In the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we have culturally painted a picture for what a good woman looks like. And as a result, we have seen in many ways how doing this has been damaging. Many of the podcasts here talk about how to help women break free of that story. But on today's podcast, we flip the coin to see how culturally in the church we have also painted a picture of what a good man looks like, and how that can also be damaging to these men and have significant effects on the most important relationship in their life. Coach Rhonda Farr talks today on the podcast about what it is like to be a high-achieving man in the church who is doing all the things he was told he should do, like providing for his family and serving faithfully in a calling, and is still having significant struggles in his marriage. When a man in this situation struggles in his marriage, there is a lot of shame and guilt because he feels he is failing miserably in the one area he thought he would succeed in. What Rhonda talks about today is that the intimate problems these men find they are struggling with are really emotional problems that have gone unresolved. Rhonda shares some great examples of clients she's worked with and talks about what needs to change so that these men and their wives can have the connecting and deep intimate relationships they both truly desire. This could be an episode that changes the life of someone you know, or more importantly, for yourself. If you think Rhonda's work would benefit you or someone you love, please share this with them and reach out to Rhonda to find out how to work with her. I promise you won't be disappointed.
Hey, everybody. Welcome. Today I am so glad to be joined by Coach Rhonda Farr. Rhonda has been on with me before, and I'm excited to have another conversation with her. Rhonda, hi.
Hi, thanks for having me again.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Rhonda, I know you've been here before, I've said that, but can you just introduce yourself a little bit and then we'll get started?
Yeah, I'm Rhonda Farr. I do a lot of coaching around emotions, but I mostly coach high achievers who are struggling in their intimate and romantic relationships. Quick story about how I kind of got here, because last time I was on, our conversation was a little bit different. So when I very first started coaching, I noticed there was a need to help couples who are fairly conservative in their physical intimacy. It's something that is being talked about a little bit more, but at that time, there weren't a lot of resources. So I kind of dove all in on coaching and helping very conservative women and couples around physical intimacy. And then I started noticing a trend. Almost always, the physical intimacy is just a symptom of emotional intimacy, right? And I kept getting these people are like, could you fix my wife? Or could you fix me for my husband? And I really, really did not like coaching people who approached it that way. And we would work on that a little bit. But what I found was this is an emotional problem. So I took about 2 years where I learned every single thing I could about emotional work, emotional processing, emotional healing, inner child work, internal family systems, like all this stuff. I worked at a drug rehabilitation center and I counseled families at that job. So I knew a lot of this already, but just to dive all the way in and bring it into relationships really kind of changed me. So then I just started thinking about the value of emotions everywhere in our lives. And that kind of brought me to this point where I started attracting these people who were not good at emotions. I feel like Heavenly Father just kind of delivers us what we need. And I started getting these clients who are really high achieving. And because of that skill set, they had a lot of outward success, but they were struggling behind closed doors in their marriages. They did not know how to create a fulfilling romantic relationship. So kind of landed me here and I love it.
Oh, that's so fascinating. And right up your alley, I think, because I view you as a high achiever and you probably are able to relate. I don't know, maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but I think that that is so interesting and so fascinating. So thank you. I'm glad you're doing that.
Well, thank you for seeing me that way, because I will say whenever I'm talking to my clients, sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, I know this lesson well. And I'll often say to them, I'm going to say this and just know I have done it too. I have felt it too. So I love it because most of my clients are men these days. I do have some women, but most of my clients are husbands. And it's so interesting because I do identify with the men a lot. I do have like a stronger personality and I come out of the gate like running sometimes. And it can really get in the way of connection. And I will say for myself, to your point, I felt like I was craving connection, like begging for this physical connection, this intimate emotional connection in my relationship, rather, not physical, but this intimate emotional connection. And I felt like my husband was just like, he wasn't sharing my communication style. He didn't really get me. But once I went all in this work, I was like, oh, I was sabotaging what I wanted most. Like I was sabotaging it. And I see my clients do it every single day. So you're right. Absolutely. That's why I love this work, because I have lived it. And to be fair, I still see it pop up. I continue.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're just aware of it now, right?
Yes.
You catch it faster. It's easy to kind of get into that cycle, but the more we learn about ourselves, we're just able to see, oh yeah, this is me being that person, that overachiever coming up again. And this is what I do about it now. Like you just learn how to better do that. I'm the queen of self-sabotage myself. So I think I understand some of those things as well. But all right. So what you want to talk about today, I think, is really interesting and really fascinating and really relevant to so many people. You probably have a lot of members of the church who are your clients and probably leaders of the church as well, because a lot of those high achievers do well in those positions. So talk to me about that, what you see there.
Yeah, bingo. Absolutely. So I remember, I don't know why I was shocked, because I'd been doing this work for a little while, but I was on a consult call with a man, and he identified himself as the bishop of his ward, which, sharing that same faith tradition, I knew what that meant. I assume most of us do, because it's a Latter-day Saint podcast here.
Yeah.
So I just started asking some questions like, what are you talking about? Like, what are you seeing in your relationship? And I was actually really surprised myself. This man was in so much pain. He felt like he couldn't really show that pain either, which I think compounded it, right? Like he's at church and he has to organize his ward and look like he has it all together, and he's counseling other people. So it didn't feel safe for him. I'm not saying it wasn't safe, but he didn't think it was safe to share his struggles. So he kind of hid it there. And then he was very successful at work, right? A very successful entrepreneur. And he didn't feel like he could share those vulnerabilities or shortcomings that he had with his team, right? And then we go into like the rest of his life with his children, and he was trying to keep it all together there so, he could create some stability at home. This guy felt like he had no place to really be seen. So we want to think about that first. And then we think about in his marriage, right? Like he was craving this connection, but his wife didn't feel safe to truly be seen either, right? Because every time she would approach him with something, it was like she felt like a problem to be solved. She felt like a disappointment to him because she couldn't keep up with his fast pace, right? Like she was struggling. So he was so embarrassed, and he's like, I feel so embarrassed to tell you this, but his wife was going to like a family reunion coming up. And he said, one of the most relieving scenarios I could create or think of in my mind is if when she went, something happened and she never came back. This is the bishop talking to me, right? He's filled with self-loathing and shame that he would even have that thought, right? And some people listening are going to be like, what? No, my bishop would never say that. He's so kind and loving. I guarantee you, if this was your bishop, you would have no idea. And some of us might even judge him. That's horrible. Like, how could he think that? But I want to tell you what I see when I hear somebody say that. I see somebody who has self-identified with external validation and achievements and accomplishments so long that they feel like that has become their value and their identity. I see somebody who has been taught in a culture that eternal marriage and eternal relationships are everything. And if you're not doing a good job in that, forget it. Like, you're really failing. I see somebody who has been told that husbands and fathers provide and teach their children by example and all that they do. And if you're not doing that and feeling like you're the example of what your kids should have, then there's something really wrong with you. You're doomed, right? And here I am, this leadership position in the church. I couldn't think of getting a divorce. That would be the most mortifying thing in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can't even hold that calling probably if I get a divorce, right? We're seeing somebody who feels absolutely trapped and stuck and like they have no place to be themselves. Externally, we're looking at this guy and we're like, oh, he's driving his Tesla and he's making all this money and he's serving in these callings and he's doing all these things. Externally, we think he has it made. This is a picture of my client right here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
This is it. He looks picture perfect from the outside, and behind the doors, he feels like a fraud and a fake and a failure and like his world is crumbling. And the most important relationship in his life, self-described and culturally described, is crumbling and he has no idea what to do. So yeah, that's my client. And that's a little bird's eye view of what we don't see in these people that we think are living the good life.
Mm-hmm. And I think what is so interesting about this conversation is, to probably most people listening, we think, oh, that doesn't really exist. Like, that person, he's just an anomaly. It's not very common, but this is a lot more common than we realize.
This is so common. And I think we find it in our culture a lot, Heather, because we're taught, rightfully so, like we want to be progressing and we want to be achieving. And it actually feels really good to the brain to be learning and doing more things. But here's what happens when our identity gets caught up in that. We start to feel like our external achievements are a reflection of who we are. Like I said before, our value, our worth, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we forget to take a look at what's beneath all of that. What happens is when we're really good at achieving, it gets tricky because that's, like I said, where we're getting those accolades, that feedback. And then people are respecting us in this one area, usually our work or our calling, something like that. And then we go home to these intimate relationships. I'm talking about with our spouse, but other intimate relationships too. And that same skill set doesn't work. It actually sabotages us. And it's so confusing to the brain when your skill set works in one area, but it totally squashes what you're craving in another area. It's really hard to put your finger on how that's happening.
Mm-hmm. So this will be a hard question then, maybe, if you're saying this is hard to put your finger on what's happening, but describe why that is. Why is it that sabotage then happens, our high achievement? Why are they not able to translate that, to transfer that high achievement over into an intimate relationship?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. So I do think some people personality wise, just in general, right? Like, we're kind of wired like that. Then I see a lot of us who've learned in childhood that that's just the way we're supposed to be, right? Don't have a lot of emotions or your parents are going to be upset. Mm-hmm. Don't give a lot of your opinions and that warm, fuzzy stuff because other people are not going to agree with that and you're not going to get what you want. Like, we just learn, especially if we have a dominant parent, we might learn to be that way, right? So many reasons we could pick this up in childhood. But also, like I said, we kind of get wired that way and reinforced from the world. So there's some people will call it like the left-brained people and are like that more dominant left brain. We just get really good at fixing and solving. So we think, oh, this is who people want us to be. And oh, by the way, we talk a lot in the church about you're supposed to be the provider. You're supposed to do these things. So we're like, oh, we're doing our job. Like, look, I'm doing my job. Value me. Like, you should think I'm the greatest thing ever. We're going to think this about our spouse. You should think I'm the greatest thing ever. But what's happening is when that spouse doesn't feel like you see them and you accept them for who they truly are, then they start to wither a little bit, right? Like, they don't feel seen. They feel like your problem to be solved, just like at work, right? It's so tricky. And then when that spouse pulls away, it can lead to a lot of depression and especially resentment from that spouse. Like, you're never spending time with us. You're always wishing I would be different. A lot of these high achievers are really hard and criticize their spouses a lot because they're doing it to themselves too, right? We always do to others what we do to ourselves. And so we have this one spouse who becomes kind of resentful, like, you never see me, you never spend time with me, you just want to fix me, I'm a constant disappointment to you. And guess where this starts to show up? In the physical intimacy now, right? Like, why do we want to be physically vulnerable with somebody who doesn't even act like they like us half the time? A lot of my clients say that their spouses say that about them. Like, I'm just a disappointment to you. You don't even like me. Like, quit trying to fix me. So they pull away physically, and then the high achiever feels really resentful. Here I am doing everything I'm, quote, supposed to do. I'm trying to keep it together for everybody. Usually they think they are, like they're over functioners. So I'm doing everything for everybody. And you don't even desire me? Are you kidding me? I was told if I do all of my duties and responsibilities, that marriage and physical intimacy would bring me the most satisfaction, like the most joy of anything else in my life. And now I don't even have that. So now insert resentment on the other side. Can you see where this cycle's going?
Yeah. And I would imagine on the other side, the overachiever is feeling like appreciative of what they're providing or whatever. And then why can't we have this relationship? But then the spouse starts to feel like the husband, and I maybe spouse,
we're generalizing.
Husband and wife. Yes, we're generalizing here, but it could be opposite, right? But
Yes.
They probably start to think that the husband is feeling entitled, like they think they're entitled to this. And that even creates more resentment. And I could see it being a really hard cycle to get out of.
100%, you're right. And both sides start to feel rejected. That's the thing. Like, as humans, we all just want to feel like we're loved and valued for who we are. We want to feel like it's okay to be us and be seen, and we're still going to be accepted and loved.
Yeah.
And what we've just described, you have two people who are feeling rejected at their core.
Which nothing good comes from that, right? When you feel like you are being rejected, when you feel like you can't be you, when you feel like you're not safe as you, it's almost impossible to have an intimate relationship.
It's so tricky. Yeah. And it's like we talked about in the beginning, why it gets tricky is the skill set that you're getting praise, you're getting accolades for. Even in the church, we say to the men, like, it is your duty, your responsibility to provide in this way. And they're like, I did it. Now, where is this joy, right? It gets so tricky because it is just a different type of being, a different type of relationship. And so I think, your listeners, some of them are going, oh my gosh, yes. Like, one wife said, I literally cried because I could finally put words to what we've been feeling. So some of the people listening are like, thank you for putting words to this. We felt like this was off for a while. But for a high achiever, especially, their next question, they're already asking it while they're listening, I bet you. Well, what do we do? Okay, you pointed it out. Now tell me what to do.
Because we'll have it fixed by next week, right? That high achiever is like, and it's going to be fixed.
Tomorrow, yesterday, just tell me what to do, right? So I do want to give some steps about that, or toward that, if that's okay.
Yeah. In fact, that was going to be my next question.
It's beautiful. First, I want to give this funny little parallel. Some of you have heard this before, but it's like this, and I didn't come up with this, but I think it's so accurate. There's this little baby fish, and he's swimming through the water one morning, and this older, wiser fish who's lived a lot says to the baby fish, "Oh, the water's nice today, right?" And that baby fish is like, "Water? What's water?" Like, what are you talking about, right? Because when you're living in it and nobody calls it out and nobody tells you what you're feeling, you just think it's life. You just think, oh, this is how it is. So I just want to start with awareness alone, that this is something that our personality types, our relationship dynamic is creating that doesn't have to be this way. I just want you to start creating awareness. Where is this showing up? First thing of what do we do about this is notice. For the overachiever, where am I trying to bring this skill set that really keeps me thriving in my career and at work? Where am I trying to push this into my marriage? What is it causing me to feel when I try to push this over into my marriage? And what might it be creating that my spouse, my partner is feeling when I try to bring this into my marriage? I would just start asking that first.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I would say probably be careful not to pile upon more judgment upon yourself when you start to see the answers to those questions, because then it gets really easy to be like, yep, I'm just failing here too, or whatever. Like be careful about that. Just
yeah, that is such a great point, because sometimes we do that, right? We're master judgers, the overachievers. We're really good at that. And I want to point out, to your point, I think something to recognize is our primal brain is always judging. Like, we get that honestly. It's just part of our survival. Cavemen, ancestors, they had to be judging. Like, what does the sky look like? And do the tigers live here? And are we about to get a drought or whatever? Like, it literally was survival for them. And so a lot of us would get really hard on ourselves. My clients will say that a lot. Why can't I stop judging? Why can't I stop being so critical of her and everybody else? Well, that's one reason, because it's literally just your primal survival brain. So if we can just address that and say, I hear you, survival brain. Like, you're trying to keep me alive. You're trying to keep me safe. And I'm really okay. In my marriage, I might not need that much help. I think that's super important. And I want to bring out one more thing in regards to the judgment. My clients will often say, gosh, I can notice I'm judging everywhere. I'm judging myself. I'm judging them. I wish I could stop doing that. But they're simultaneously afraid to stop doing. If I stop judging and I stop criticizing and I stop trying to change the other person, then nothing might change, and this might be as good as it gets. Overachievers, this might be their primal fear in life. If this is as good as it gets, I have nothing else to look forward to. No more accomplishments and achievements. And they are afraid of it.
That is so fascinating to me. And I recently was coaching a client. I would describe her as an overachiever. And the question, she said that exact thing. I can't stop, like, in essence, shaming myself or the people around me. It was more herself that she was focused on at this point. I can't stop shaming myself because of the fear of what will happen when I do. Like, I won't be able to achieve the things I'm doing. And I said, okay, I want you to spend this next week thinking about all the things you were able to accomplish because you shamed yourself into it. And she came back the next week and was completely dumbfounded. She was like, I couldn't think of one thing that I was able to accomplish because I was hard on myself to try to achieve it. She's like, my entire life, I've thought this worked and I couldn't think of a single thing. And it's going to be the same for all of us. We think that it's really serving us in some way, and it really does not.
So insightful. I want to add to that to the listeners. If pressuring, shaming, and criticizing people into change were going to work, it would have worked by now.
Yes.
You've been doing that for a long time.
And trying really hard too to do that. It's not like you've just been subtly trying to. It's probably a lot of hard work trying to. Yeah.
You can actually Google this. There are studies that people have grown seeds. They have talked to little snowflakes that are forming, like icicles and such, all kinds of things. When we speak words of kindness, words of love to children, even think about the humans now. That's when we thrive. Living things thrive in love, kindness, and compassion. There's a study that I just read, and I wish I could give you the exact reference for this, but just Google it. Plants, Vishen, Vishen. He's the one I heard about. He was talking about this on Lewis Howes' podcast, but he said that they grew these little seeds, and they said to one of them, everything was the same except for how they spoke to them. You're so ugly. You're such a dumb seed. Your leaves are upside down. You're all wrong. Then they just said, oh, you're a plant, like very neutrally to one. And then one, like, you're so beautiful. You are majestic. That's why you're here. Like, they said that to the other. Literally, the one they trash talked had leaves that were all gnarly, mangled, just stunted. It barely grew. You guys, this is real. This is getting a little woo-woo for some of you, but this is for real. Like humans, relationships, we thrive in compassion, love, kindness, acceptance. And some of our listeners are going to be like, okay, I'm starting to think maybe you're right. But how do I do that? Like when she really annoys me or when he's really on my nerves, like, how do I pretend that I'm okay with that? I would turn all the way back 180 and start to practice love, kindness, and acceptance with yourself first, because that is the only way you're going to have the capacity to do that for another. That might be the work of your life. You high achievers who are used to like doubling down, accomplishing, criticizing, shaming yourself, that's really where it starts.
And people don't always believe that. But when they start delving into that work, I don't know about you, but most of the work that I do with my clients really does start with more of self-love and self-acceptance, because to your point, we can't really do anything. We can't progress in the way that we want to until we can start doing that. And my clients are always so fascinated about what happens when they are able to, I mean, just how you mimicked talking to the plants, the different ways of talking. Just imagine, like, even how you feel when you say those things, even if you are speaking to somebody else, speaking in those different ways feels very different inside of you. But if you are addressing yourself, like flipping it around and having that conversation with yourself, imagine how that feels, just having that conversation within yourself. It feels very, very different. And the trajectory of what you're able to do really does change.
I love that you said that. Every relationship in your life is a reflection of the relationship you have with yourself. Now, that reflection might manifest a little bit differently with different people, right? Like it could come up differently in your kids, your parents, your spouse. Some of your relationships might reflect some of the work that you've done with yourself that you're really proud of. Some of the deeper relationships that you have might reflect some of the work that you have not done yet. And that's why it's there, right? Mm-hmm. Some of your relationships might reflect like a more superficial level of you. And that's okay. It's supposed to be that way. But just start to notice that every relationship you have is a reflection of the relationship you have with yourself.
That can seem a little bit intimidating to think about, actually, and even a little bit scary.
There is help. That's why we're here, right? Yeah. That's what we're doing. I want to offer one more thing, if it's okay, because when you were saying the way you feel in your own body, made me think about something that I see in my clients a lot. I love what you said. When you're speaking kindness, when you're speaking truth, I think most of the humans want to do that, right? Mm-hmm. The high achievers and others, not just high achievers, but that's just who I coach. That's why you're the topic today. We don't want to be critical. I alluded to that already. Like my clients are like, help me stop. I don't know how to stop. But you said something that made me really think about this. What's happening before we even get to the relationship with our spouse is a breach of self, right? Yeah. Like if I asked my clients, like, who do you want to be as a partner, a wife or a husband? They usually will say, well, I want to be loving. I want to be accepting. I want to be kind. But because of the things that they've learned, their history, like a whole slew of reasons that were critical, right? They come out as a more critical partner, as a more judgmental partner, right? They have breached their own desires first. And it feels really out of integrity, even to them. They don't know a better way and they keep repeating it. But to your point, it doesn't feel good to them either. Mm-mm. And I would say if you're a high achiever out there and you're pushing, you're pulling, you feel like you're dragging your your partner along and it's just like exhausting to you, it's because you're also in a breach, probably with who you want to be, regardless of anything else or anybody else around.
Yeah. It probably is actually the number one reason why you're feeling terrible, right? Because you are not being the person that you want to be. And as you focus on that, then all the other relationships in your life, especially those that are close to you, cannot help but change and have effects because you start to live the way you want to live.
Yeah, it's so true. It's easier though to blame other people. Oh,
Oh
well, if
yeah.
she would just desire me more, I'd be happier. Well, if they would just respect me in this way, or if she would just come along with my goals and my dreams and my hopes, then maybe, maybe not. Right?
Yeah.
I always tell my clients, because sometimes my clients come to me saying, should I stay or should I go? Like, I don't even know if I want to be in this relationship anymore. And I always say to them, I have no opinion about that. I could never know if you should stay or go. But I promise you, if you don't clean your relationship up with yourself, you'll just take all of this to a new relationship. It will go with you because you're in breach of you.
Yeah. Well, and I think that blaming, like if they could just change, if they could just be different, that is the first sign that there is something amiss within yourself. So as we talk about awareness, I think that's an important piece to be aware of like when you notice yourself doing that, start to look inward and look to see where it is that you might feel like you're not living with integrity with yourself. And there's plenty of people that are listening right now going, oh, but that's totally different for me. In my case, it really is this person's fault.
You're totally right.
Yeah. And, that's not to say that there are not relationships where people are not safe. And if that's you, if you are in an unsafe relationship, we're not talking about that. That's something very different. But anyway, it is so important to just kind of have that awareness and see where you're not being the person that you want to be.
That's so important that you brought that up. I'm glad you talked about like actual safety, like male or female, it doesn't matter who. Like if you're in a relationship that is physically, emotionally, spiritually abusive in any way, we are not talking to you.
Yeah.
But to your point, I remember I was on this call one time with this guy, high achiever. He's a surgeon, and he was convinced if his wife would desire him more physically, their whole marriage would change. And I said to him on the call, this is not about sex. And he's like, oh no, it is. I'm like, nope, it's not. And luckily I was a little more eloquent on the call, and we've had a really good working relationship together. But like 5 months in, he's like, oh my gosh. He's like, I remember when you told me it wasn't about physical intimacy and I didn't believe you at all. And he was just like pouring his heart out. He's like, when I don't feel desired by her, I just don't feel appreciated overall. But because of some things that happened in his childhood, he really felt like the marriage was in trouble every single time. He was like, I feel like maybe we were going to get a divorce. His parents had divorced. It was kind of, he saw his dad leaving in kind of a traumatic way. And what he finally realized was physical intimacy was just a token to him. It was more than a token, but it was also a token to him that, we're okay. The marriage is okay, right? It was so fascinating to see his full circle. He's like, I can see it now. Like, of course she wants me. She loves me. She desires me. It's just my nervous system gets really dysregulated when I have a thought that this part of our marriage isn't okay. I always go back to that moment when my dad left us, right? So just to your point, like there are deeper things going on, and it's usually just not about what we think it is. And that's okay. We all have blind spots. We all have blind spots. And that's the beauty of coaching and therapy and like all the things that we do.
I just think if anything people take from this conversation today, it's just noting that none of this is not a word, but unnormal, right? People think that, well, there's something wrong with me. This is just the way I'm going to have to get used to living. And that's when they do start thinking, well, do I stay? Do I go? Because I don't want to live the rest of my life this way because this feels terrible, but they can't see it being good the other way either. But I just think noticing and noting that it doesn't have to stay this way. And yet at the same time, it's normal. Like there's plenty of people that are in the same situation. And so it's nothing that we have to hide from or fear, but there is things to do so that it can be better and different.
Yeah, totally. The way I would say that, I agree 100% is it's a common dynamic.
Yeah.
It's a
Thank you.
common
you just
dynamic.
Summed that all up in like 2 words, what took me 30 seconds to say, which is typical for me.
No, it's what I do every day. So this is my forte. So yeah, I see it all the time.
Yeah. And I think realizing that does help people feel a little safer, right? Oh, if this is a common dynamic, then there is hope, there is help, and there's nothing wrong with me, because that there's something must be wrong with me also, then just keeps you stuck there.
Yeah, 100%. It's just a common dynamic. A lot of it is driven by our primal brain to be achieving and evolving and always on the lookout for problems. Like, your primal brain is working exactly as it should. And there are things that we can do to make some shifts and changes if you notice that this is you. Like, you're not alone. My clients will say all the time, I'm so embarrassed to admit this, but, oh, I'm so ashamed of myself because, right? They judge themselves so harshly. And because of these high achievers, they often hold high positions in their communities, their churches, their careers, whatever. They don't feel like they can be really honest about the things they're so ashamed and embarrassed about. And guess what grows when we hide it?
Oh, the shame.
Oh, the shame. Exactly. So, yeah, I love that we can wrap it up that way. Like, it's a very common dynamic. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not a bad person. I had this client one time who was so ashamed that he wasn't feeling attracted to his wife. I can hear everybody gasping, oh, what a jerk, what a pig. But what we got to is, no, you were socialized to look at women that way, right? She was socialized to look at herself that way. She was judging herself too, right? But everybody felt sorry, compassion for her, and were super ticked off at him. No, it's just the way our brain works. People socialize us to do something one way, then our brain starts to function in those patterns. Then it doesn't work for our current situation anymore. So we think something is terribly wrong, right? And then we start to shame ourselves. What's the biggest relief of his life? When I said, oh, no, a lot of people struggle when their spouse goes through changes hormonally, pregnancy, whatever. A lot of people struggle. Doesn't mean you don't love her. Doesn't mean you're a terrible person. It does probably mean it's something we want to work on, which he agreed. And he is doing amazingly well at loving his wife now, right? But if he had hid that in shame, guess what? He'd be still hiding in shame, secretly loathing himself and not knowing how to connect with her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And which results in two unhappy people, which it probably already was, versus just the one, right? The relationship is very important. And this is something that I learned from listening to Amy Gianni, one of my favorite teachers, but that you have two individuals that you're considering, but you also have a third entity, which is the relationship. Mm-hmm. And so when you can actually look at it in separate ways like that, yes, you want to be happy. She wants to be happy, and you want a happy relationship, that you have to work on the two individuals in order to have that strong relationship.
So true. So true. There's a lot involved in that. And I think the more compassion we can have for all involved, the relationship and each partner, just like the snowflakes and the plants and the children, that's where we grow and flourish, when we can meet people where they're at, accept them, and show them how to thrive.
Yeah, so good. Okay. Thank you so much, Rhonda. This has been really interesting and hopefully educational, and maybe even confirming or like permissional for some people to feel like, oh, this has been okay that I've been feeling this way. But anyway, in all of this, can you please share with people where they can find more of you?
Yeah, I hope it's been a little bit thought-provoking. I know we've said some things like, the bishop who doesn't care if his wife comes home, the husband who's not attracted to his wife. Like, we've said some things that could feel a little uncomfortable to some people. And I want to acknowledge that first. Like, I get it. It could feel very uncomfortable. I just don't think we should keep ignoring those things, because they are out there. And I really want to call them out to light and help people instead of shaming and pushing them to side. So I want to say that first. But yes, you can find me at rhondafarr.com. And when you go to my page right now, I have a pop-up that will allow you to get 3 of my most common interviews that answer the most common questions that you have. It comes with a PDF to help you have a conversation with your spouse about these really tricky topics. So go find me there. It's all free. The interviews, the PDFs, the downloads, go partake. If this resonated with you, there's a lot more. So also, you can find me on Instagram at Rhonda Farr _coaching. That's where I'm most active, and I share information and insight there as well.
Always sharing some great stuff there too. I always enjoy reading your stuff, but thank you, Rhonda. This has been fantastic. And I know we all know people, maybe ourselves, that can benefit from this. So I'm excited to actually share this with some people that here I am. Oh, if I could just fix that person. It's not my husband. I'm not saying that, but we all know people who could benefit from just hearing and just feeling seen, I think. Thank you, Rhonda, so much for being here. This has been so helpful, and I am grateful for this conversation and grateful for the help that you're offering to people in the world who really do need this. So thank you.
Thank you. I have had so much fun being here. I appreciate you too. Thanks for all that you do for us and getting the word out for all of us.
Awesome. Thanks, Rhonda. Have a good one, everybody. We'll see you next time. Hey, we just wanted to thank you for spending part of your day here with us at Latter-day Life Coaches and being part of this conversation. Share this with your friends so that you can have a conversation with them on this topic as well. And as always, subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. Have a good one, my friends.